Hello, welcome to today's HR Huddle. Thanks for joining me, Jen. Good to see you.
Nice to see you too,
And
Tamera.
we're going to take some time. Jen and I were debriefing about some conferences and some events we've been at, and also some conversations we've been having with HR professionals. And one thing that's been coming up is this idea of collaboration among specifically the operations teams, the distinct operations teams, HR, marketing, IT, et cetera, but also collaboration, with the different service lines and practice areas too. But how to be, more effective, more streamlined, more unified in approach and some of the things that we want to get done. So we thought we would spend our time today exploring that and how we could be more effective with that. So Jen, I don't know what else you would want to add to set that up. Anything you want to add there?
Just, I'll get us off and running on it, Tamera. I think a lot of times the service, the operational areas, HR, IT, finance, marketing, we view ourselves as, service providers to the service lines themselves, audit, tax, consulting, CAS, whatever your service lines might be, and also serving the partner group. And we don't necessarily look at the role we play in serving other operational areas. And this idea that we are co-collaborators with all of the operational areas to, allow the firm to run max strategically, max efficiently, max intelligently. And that if we work together on the operational side and we really have, wonderful, clear delineation of who's doing what and where the overlap lies in our business processes and how we're going to regularly communicate with one another about things. When we have that in place, we can really make a difference for the people in the service positions, the client service positions, and for leadership. And we can also really make a bigger difference for clients. And when we don't work functionally together, when we work in silos, when we don't communicate, when we are kind of frustrated with each other for not, doing your part or stepping on my toes or all that stuff that we sometimes see, then it can really not be additive, but instead subtractive from the whole equation. And so anyway, I had a chance to be with a group recently of HR and IT leaders, and they invited me to come and spend the time just talking about nothing but the collaboration between HR and IT in two business process areas. One was onboarding of new staff, and one was offboarding of people leaving, and how to make those business processes more functional and how to make that collaboration more functional. And it was a super insightful conversation. And, there's no real like 12 o'clock to 12 o'clock starting place for it. But, one of the things that you could think about right away is, if I'm in HR, I might start writing down, create a spreadsheet, because that's what I'm always going to do is make columns somehow. Jen's always going to get you to columns. But, HR, these are my business processes. These are the ones that I interface with IT on. These are the ones I interface with finance on. These are the ones I interface with on marketing. And then of their business processes that are predominantly theirs to own, which are the ones that I have a part in? I might have a big part, but what is that part? And to look at just that to start with, mapping the overlap areas. And
Right.
starting just with that, it can start to make you think sort of strategically about who are my operational partners and how can we help each other more effectively.
Well, as I listen to you describe that, it can identify a few things. One, it can identify where are we dropping the ball? And it's like, oh, right here. And, where is it? What's the overlap? Where's the lack of clarity of ownership or miscommunication or no communication? And then also, when I heard you saying that, I could also hear that we could find ways probably to streamline it because there is overlap. And we might be duplicating like crazy and not realize it or realize it and being frustrated by it. And that's maybe some of the stepping on the toes that you were referring to. But my goodness, just being able to, see it in kind of black and white, if you will, or colors or whatever you do to your spreadsheet. But, to be able to visualize it, I think can be huge.
I agree. And one of the persistent complaints of the group I was with, the HR and IT leaders, was, the partners, somebody's leaving the firm and they gave notice, and I get 4 hours notice to help them offboard. And I was thinking about that, and first of all, sometimes you don't get much notice because we're going to help the person leave. Right. And we're not going to give a ton of notice to anybody, but we might have a little more notice to HR and IT, and we trust them with a lot already, HR and IT. They know a lot of the firm's secrets and have access to a lot of the firm's strategic intelligence. And so we can go ahead and tell them when we know we're going to do that and give them more notice. But the other thing I thought about, Tamara, when I was standing there with those folks was like, so I'm the partner who's going to offboard somebody on my team. They give notice, and I have to individually think about, well, I better call finance and ask them for the final check. I better call HR so that they can do whatever COBRA benefits and, and go through the offboarding process, get them to sign any releases that we might have or whatever it may be. I better call IT so that they can, like, as one partner, I'm probably going to screw up and not call everybody. You know what I mean? Like I'm going to forget somebody in this process or not copy them on the email or whatever. And so it got me thinking, like, have we educated all the key leaders on the processes and who's involved in the process at what step? Have we thought about an integrated approach where we say, when we know we're going to offboard somebody, contact this person, the offboarding point person for all operational areas. They will turn around and kick off an offboarding spreadsheet, checklist, or workflow if you've got it automated, which some firms do, which I just love. Kick off the workflow for the offboarding of Tom Smith or whatever, and then all the other operational areas will be informed by the kickoff of that process. Why do we have to make it so siloed in the way that we're picturing it? And so anyway, it was a really cool, robust conversation because it had a lot of possibility for improvement, and not saying, that's not a veiled way of saying it was really screwed up. It wasn't, it was working, but it had issues. But gosh, it could be so much better if they all worked together and saw themselves like, hey, we're unified, we're in lockstep, we lock arms, we serve the firm together with no gaps, and we talk to each other all the time. That's another place, Tamara, maybe you want to take that softball I'll throw you, called we never meet. Right. I'm an HR leader. I don't meet with any of the other leaders on a regular basis on the operations side unless we have a terrible emergency.
Right. Well, where I was going to start, the whole idea of meeting when you were saying that is educating the partners about our process. We have to do it more than once. I can't say we did that back in 2019, and they should know. First of all, I assume you're adding new partners. So it needs to be part of your new partner orientation. And I don't think it's a bad idea to give like an HR update in general to the partners. Here's, what we're doing. Here's our onboarding. Here's our offboarding. Here's our career paths. Here's our career advisor, whatever it is, right? Recruiting. Here's our current messaging and positioning. So there's maybe group meetings. And I thought of new partners when you were describing that, but then also continuing to make sure our current partners are up to speed on the processes, and it changes and evolves, and we should be telling them that. And in person, in writing, and in our, teams, or what, what I mean, like several ways. But then, Jen, to your point about, communications and meeting with them, we should be doing what we called internal networking. We talked about that, I think, on a prior HR huddle. And, we talk about, we're service providers. I need to be meeting with my top clients. My top clients happen to be my partners, and service line leaders are probably the A clients, and meeting with them on a regular basis, and talking about things that are coming up, talking to them about ways that we can help them. It engenders trust, because one of the reasons they might not come to you and say a partner's leaving is they worry about trust. Now you can say we shouldn't worry about that with HR with all the confidential information, but it's relationship, it's relatedness. And if I don't have that relationship with you, I don't know. I have questions. It's just natural human nature. So meeting with them to talk about how can I help you? What's going on with your staff today? Here are some process changes that we're having. Here are some reminders, maybe some cheat sheets or something too. So those are some ways that you could be in regular communication with them.
I love it, Tamara. And I want to say, like, I'm picturing myself as a partner, and HR comes in and says, now let me walk you through some of our processes. I'd be like, snooze fest. This must be the time that I'm pulling out my iPad and, or something. And obviously that's not what we're intending. But I might do a process spotlight once a quarter or something,
Right.
or every other month. And I would not go alone. If I'm the lead in HR, I'm going to take marketing, IT with me. Maybe finance. I don't know. Maybe we're all four going to be there, and we're going to do a spotlight on a process that we're all integrated into. And we're going to say, okay, this is what it looks like, and this is how much it costs us, and this is who does which piece of this, and here's the kind of the order, and here's who you should inform first, and we'll trip the rest of it off with the rest of the group. And I just think that process, you're right. Not only did we teach, share it, document it, put it in a manual nobody reads, but we also, for real.
Sorry.
Yeah, I know. Unless there's a litigation or like a state board of some calling, we're probably not reading it. So instead, it's more like, these things change. We
Right.
might have documented, and I might have told you, use the example 2019, 4 years. I mean, man, sea change city. So I think we just have to regularly go through some kind of a rotation of the big processes with our leadership team, and do little spotlights or videos or something that can say, hey, here's the latest on this process. And I know we do a good job when we have like a major initiative, like we're launching a new HRIS. So I'm going to give you lots of updates on that, and I'm good with that, except it's just, that's like, I don't know, new stuff and big change stuff. I think the old stuff has to get talked about too. And so like onboarding and offboarding, those processes might not change a whole lot, but no one understands all the pieces of it. So they step on your toes or leave big gaps regularly. So I think the communication piece on the with our service lines and our partners is super critical. The law of seven, people need to hear something 7 times to be able to articulate it back with accuracy. So having done it once or sending out an email with a link back to a Teams file, forget it. That doesn't even count. That's a 0. That's not even 1 of 7. And so, I think that's important. The other thing is communication between our departments. And I had some interesting stuff come up in this group, and it was a decent sized group, like 60 people, a split evenly between HR and IT, or pretty evenly. And, some of the IT guys were like, well, here are the different groups I convened. Should I have HR on some of these? And he went on to just tell, what they were. And I was like, innovation and, systems change initiatives. And, and I was like, I was trying to find one that I could save HR from going to, no, they keep them out of that one. But for the most part, they sounded like HR should be given the opportunity to come. And some of them were like, how could we even be doing that thing without HR there on a regular basis? And so I suggested we look at our processes and put them in columns and look for those overlaps. Also, the committees and the meetings that we hold, and what do we convene, and who is on them, and how could they be more effective if we had better operational representation. And maybe not every meeting that person from that other operational group comes, but every second or third meeting, and we have a part of the agenda where we just say, hey, here are the places that these processes come together, and how could we improve them? How could we automate them? How could we improve communication? Who owns them? That's the other thing, Tamera. And I hate this because it's convergence broken record time. But like who owns what?
Right.
The lack of clarity in some of these processes is amazing. And so we have these big uh-ohs where something doesn't get covered. Somebody told kind of a gory story about a contractor who hadn't worked for us for 4 or 5 months, not Convergence, but another firm. 4 or 5 months they've been gone. This independent contractor they were contracting with directly, and they still had complete systems access. Mm-hmm. And they were gone for 5 months, and IT finally like, somebody said something and they're like, what? And they were so bummed that they didn't know, and they were like, I do know when it's an employee, but somehow we're managing the contractor process differently. And so anyway, it's all of these things, you could make them like huffy puffy make wrong. That's terrible. Who messed up there. We could try to be upset about it, or you could be like, just think how much better we could get if we find all these little loopholes and these gaps and started closing them up. And I find operational leaders to be super interested in efficiency and streamlining and stopping overlap. And so I think if you just did some of this mapping and communicating and strategizing and unifying. So that's,
Right.
I think, Tamara, that's the thing for you now. You take that.
Yeah, well, that's exactly right.
Unifying is what I'm really after.
Well, and how do we get together? I know a couple firms that have shared with me their operations leaders, their whether it's the CEO, the C-suite, or the senior level operations leaders, they meet on a regular basis, whether it's monthly or whatever, to talk about what's going on in their organizations, and they're talking about what they need to know, so they minimize the surprises, so they're more coordinated, so they're unified in messaging. We're giving consistent messaging as the leaders to our customer, called the partners and the service lines, and you have to do that. You have to be unified as a service group, and the better you are doing that, the more seamless it's going to be what you're trying to get done. But also on the partner end, their perception is going to be, you all got it handled. You've all thought this through. You're all communicating together. I don't have to worry about anything, because they can see it. And your idea, Jen, of coming and doing like spotlights and bringing those people, you've already been met. You've already been talking about it. You already know what the processes are. You know who owns what. And it's just becomes, of course, that's how it happens.
Yeah.
And some of these things we do not very often. We're probably not offboarding a partner very often. Contractors maybe a little bit more, but like the offboarding, when you said that, it's like, how am I supposed to remember what that is? Like I have to make it up every single time instead of it going to the right person. But if they know, hey, this is the point person for that, and then they trigger all these other things, and you guys are in lockstep together, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Then they're like, we have the best operations team in the whole world.
Exactly.
They're like singing praises, and they're not even giving it another thought.
Instead of the managing partner being like, oh my gosh, my operations team, they just won't get along, which is sometimes how it feels, because we're frustrated with each other because so-and-so didn't tell me, or so-and-so didn't do their part, or I ended up having to pick up the slack. And when we unify and we establish collaboration as a core value, and innovation and efficiency and communication, and we lay down some, and I don't mean company core values, I mean the core values that construct our relationship. When we agree on that, it can really feel light and hopeful and positive and engaging and interesting to all of us, instead of like friction and conflict and blamey and disappointment and all that stuff. Yeah.
Competing happens. It's just weird.
Yeah, no reason for that at all. I was just thinking, Tamara, while you were talking about, like, again, I'm sorry, everybody, I have onboarding, offboarding on the brain, because that's where this conversation started. But like, I'm imagining we offboard contractors at about the same time every year, if we're going to do it in any volume, that we onboard them to work during a peak period. And so there's this onboarding process and training and all this stuff that has to happen. And then if they really are short term, they usually offboard like May, another offboarding in October, November, so we could look at the cycles of what's happening in the business. We know when the recruiting cycles are between marketing and HR, and that, on campus, who's going on campus, what are our premiums going to be, what sort of messaging, how will we differentiate, what are our wow factors, all of those things. We know when spring, on campus is, and when fall on campus happens. We know these cycles, and we could document them and look at these things that we do together. IT generally doesn't do a big systems cutover on March 12th, so you know what I mean? Like, that's unlikely. I mean, I guess it could happen, and depends on the system, of course, but pretty rare. So IT's really got some very choice times that they could do anything material or significant in the systems arena. And so just like sitting down even with a 12-month calendar and saying, okay, inside these processes we all own, when are sort of the peak periods when it would call all 3 or 4 departments together to be working on these in concert? And so I just think that's another thing to think about. So like the poor
Like a
onboarding.
calendar.
Yeah. Yeah. The
Yeah.
offboarding though of the contractor 5 months ago, hard to say whether they were offboarded because they weren't working out or whether they were offboarded when all the other contractors were, but their name wasn't on the list or nobody
Right.
mentioned it, or you know what I mean? So, and I know that it's not perfectly, they all come on at once and they all go off
Right.
at once. I get that. But I'm just saying, I do think there are cycles to this stuff and we could
Yeah,
identify. Yeah.
well, and then you can identify those that are not, like I'm thinking about consulting. I might have contractors that are project based. When projects come up, well, what are our protocols for that? And what's our security for that? So I can have this bulk, periods. And then I can say, okay, for these, the way we use these contractors, that's we're doing offshoring and outsourcing and those contractors. There's all kinds of places we could say for these scenarios, this is how we do it. And just make sure we've thought through it. So yeah,
Yes.
huge.
Yeah. And I see so much upside. That's all. Like I got really inspired leaving those people. I know they got excited, about
Yeah.
the possibilities. And some of them already had a lot of the stuff we're talking about in place, but they just got one more like cool thing they could do that would make them more unified as an operations team and serving the rest of the constituents.
Yes.
And I think that's the name of the game, unity there.
Yes. Love it. So great. Well, hopefully this gave you some ideas. We welcome your feedback or any questions you have on it. And we hope you have a wonderful week and we'll see you next Monday. Thanks so much for joining us today.